Welcome to Canada Next, your daily news app. Get smart AI-generated news summaries instantly from the creators of the Canada Next YouTube channel. Download Canada Next on the App Store today.
Good on Canada for avoiding our mistakes. That is the sentence Michael Byers kept hearing in Canberra. Byers teaches global politics and international law at the University of British Columbia, and he has spent recent weeks interviewing Australian policy experts about their own submarine program. Almost everyone in Ottawa assumed Canada had taken the modest option by choosing up to 12 conventional German boats over nuclear power. Australians are reading that same decision the exact opposite way. Dear viewers, it is rare that a country gets to see its own choice reflected back through a close friend's eyes. Australia and Canada are not rivals here. Same crown, same intelligence family, and the same stubborn habit of punching above their weight. Both countries face the identical question within a few years of each other. How does a maritime middle power rebuild an underwater fleet when the ocean has turned contested again? Australia answered first, Canada answered later. The distance between those two answers carries a price tag of 368 billion Australian dollars. And money is not even the part that Australians want to talk about. Let me show you what actually happened, because the thing Canberra envies has a name, and it is not a discount. Go back to 2021. Australia already had a submarine contract in hand, 12 conventionally powered boats, French-built, a deal years in the making. Then Prime Minister Scott Morrison canceled it. In its place, he joined United States President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to announce a new security partnership called AUKUS. The replacement plan was bigger and far more ambitious. 8 nuclear-powered submarines. The first 3 would be Virginia-class boats, bought second-hand from the Americans. The remaining 5 would be a brand-new AUKUS class, designed and built by Britain, a class that does not yet exist outside of drawings and promises. Then came the estimate, 368 billion Australian dollars to acquire and operate that fleet over 3 decades. By Australia's own accounting, roughly 245 billion in American dollars. That figure does not include the cost of disposing of the nuclear fuel once the boats are eventually cut up. Translation: a very large share of that money leaves Australia long before an Australian submarine arrives. One portion flows to the United States to accelerate Virginia-class production so 3 used boats can be freed up for Canberra. Another portion flows to Britain to rejuvenate a submarine building industry that had been left to decay for decades. Australia is helping to pay for 2 other countries' shipyards and waiting in line behind both of them. Now hold that picture and watch Canada. August 26, 2025. Mark Carney is in Kiel, Germany, walking through the TKMS submarine yard alongside the company's chief executive, Oliver Burkhart, standing in front of a 212A-class boat under maintenance. 2 months later, he is on Jeoje Island in South Korea, climbing down a ladder into a submarine at the Hanwha Ocean Shipyard. 2 continents, 2 serious bidders, 1 shortlist, and a prime minister who insisted on physically standing inside the product before spending $1 of Canadian money on it. Then, on July 6 of this year, at Canadian Forces Base Halifax, Carney gave the answer. Ottawa chose Germany, up to 12 boats, with TKMS selected as the preferred supplier and Norway alongside as a program partner. Look at what those boats actually do. Hydrogen fuel cells let them stay submerged for up to 1 month without surfacing. They run extremely quiet enough that detecting them becomes close to impossible for anyone hunting them. And critically, they come off a production line that is already running today, building boats for navies that already operate them. That is the part Australian experts keep circling back to. Not the price, the fact that the line exists. If you want to understand these decisions before they turn into headlines, the procurement fights, and the fine print nobody reads until it is far too late to change, this is exactly the kind of story we take apart here every night. Because the bill is not what worries Canberra most. Gareth Evans, who served as Australia's foreign minister, now predicts that Australia's submarines will end up absorbed into the command structure of the United States Pacific Fleet as Washington concentrates on containing China. AUKUS also hands American naval planners something they did not previously have: a nuclear submarine base in Western Australia, sitting on the Indian Ocean coast. So why does that matter so much to a sailor in Halifax or a Esquimalt? Because a submarine you cannot independently task is not entirely your submarine. Then there is the fuel. Every one of those boats will run on uranium-235 enriched to 93%, a higher grade than the uranium inside the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. The 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was written to restrict exactly that kind of transfer to countries without nuclear weapons. Australia's legal position is that the treaty never explicitly banned weapons-grade fuel for naval propulsion, so the transfer is permitted. That argument may well hold. The problem is what comes after it. Once one respected democracy establishes that weapons-grade uranium can cross borders for naval use, every other government with naval ambitions has a precedent to point at. And uranium-235 has a half-life of 704 million years, which means the fuel stays weapons-grade for an unimaginable stretch of time after the submarines themselves are scrap metal. Australian politics locked the whole thing in place. AUKUS was announced in an election year where it could easily have become a wedge between Morrison's governing Liberals and the Labour opposition. Sensing the trap, Labour leader Anthony Albanese embraced it, and he has kept that position as Prime Minister. 4 years on, the argument has not gone away. Labour has split over the agreement, with former Prime Minister Paul Keating leading the revolt from inside his own party. And underneath all of it sits the sentence that should stop every Canadian cold. AUKUS was negotiated when the United States was a reliable ally. That is no longer the description anyone uses. Yet it would take an extraordinarily brave prime minister to walk into a room and tell Donald Trump the deal is canceled. Here is the real difference between the two programs, and it has almost nothing to do with propulsion. Canada did not buy cheaper submarines. Canada bought a program it can still change its mind about. Every detail from the German choice clicks into that one idea. An operational production line means Canada is not funding somebody else's industrial recovery and waiting for their politics to cooperate. Conventional propulsion means no weapons-grade fuel arriving on Canadian soil and no treaty argument to defend in front of the world. Germany and Norway as partners means no foreign basing concession written into the fine print, no command bargain, no clause that quietly hands a bigger navy the right to decide where Canadian boats sail during somebody else's crisis. Dear viewers, Australia bought capability and paid for it partly in control. Canada bought capability and kept the control. That is what Canberra actually envies, not the invoice, but the freedom to still say no. For a country that spent this entire year being told it has no leverage and no alternatives, that is worth sitting with. And if you want the strategic layer of these stories before the mainstream picks them up, staying with this channel is the simplest way to do it. None of which means Ottawa gets to feel clever yet. TKMS has only been provisionally selected. Contract negotiations are still live, and a switch to another supplier remains technically possible until ink meets paper. The Royal Canadian Navy may also want modifications. American torpedoes instead of European ones, for instance. Canada has been down that exact road before. When Ottawa bought 4 second-hand British submarines in 1998, the modifications piled on cost and delay, and the fleet never fully recovered its reputation. Crewing is the harder problem. A fleet that size requires a lot of submariners, and the job asks people to live communally inside a sealed tube for weeks at a time, without daylight and without a word to their families. A modern submarine is as complex as a 5th-generation fighter jet, and it does not come with ejection seats, Recruiting and training that force is a decade-long commitment, not a procurement announcement. This is what variable geometry looks like when it reaches steel. Ottawa is building submarines with Germany and Norway while widening its trade footing across Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Washington stays a partner. It stops being the landlord. No single dependence swapped for a different single dependence. And Australia deserves better than mockery here. Canberra made its choice in a different ocean, under different pressure, in a year when the American alliance looked permanent. The honesty coming out of Australia right now, from working analysts all the way up to a former prime minister leading a revolt in his own party, is a gift to Canadians. And friends who tell you the truth about their own expensive lessons are rarer than allies who applaud everything you do. Watch 3 things from here. Whether the TKMS contract is actually signed and on what terms. Which combat system and torpedoes the Navy insists on, because that is where the 1998 mistake would repeat itself. And the recruiting numbers, which will tell you long before the first hull arrives whether 12 boats was realistic. So here is what I want to know from you tonight. Was Ottawa right to take 12 conventional submarines that can be delivered from a working line, keeping full command in Canadian hands? Or did Canada think too small? And should a country with 3 coastlines have reached for nuclear range, whatever the political cost? Australians are debating their answer in public right now. Canadians should be debating ours just as loudly. Leave your position below, because this comment section consistently understands this file better than most of the commentary written about it. And if you missed our earlier breakdown of the submarine shortlist and what South Korea lost, it connects directly to everything you just heard. This is Canada Next. I'll see you tomorrow.